Here, I have a tip for your dad. I found this out, that you can get up to 1,000 steps just sitting still if you wear it on the arm and hand in which you masturbate with.
I'm going to tell him that.
You let your dad know.
I'll let him know that if he puts his Fitbit on your arm, he can get a lot of steps out of it.
That's true.
Wow. How many steps did you get?
I don't remember. It was in the thousands, though.
That's
Damn impressive.
Nuts. Wow. Isn't that frustrating? Like sometimes I'm like, come on already. Literally.
No, I enjoy the longer sessions.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't, because I'm like, somebody else has to use this public bathroom. I gotta get out of here. Hey everyone ever, and welcome to 20th Century Pop, the show where we try to understand the present while living in the past. My name is Tim Blevins.
And I am Bob Canning.
I felt very NPR-ish with my introduction. I felt like I had my hands folded in front of me. I was leaning into the microphone. I was about to push some of these great tote bags we have for subscribers.
I did hear a more subdued tone in your intro. Yeah.
I think so. I was going to follow it up by giving the weather, but having some sound effects in the background like I was walking through a forest, because that's how they give the weather on NPR.
Is it?
Wow. Narrative. Everything's narrative on NPR. I enjoy it. I enjoy telling people I enjoy it. I don't listen to it that much, but when I do.
I listen to it on my short commute, so I don't get too much out of it. I guess I don't hear enough.
Bite-sized NPR. It's all lowercase letters the way you do it.
Yeah. It's mostly just what's coming up, and then the tote bags, and then I'm home.
Oh, so you never get to what's coming up. You just know it's coming up.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, that's news. Man, there's a lot. But we're doing a retro shock today, people. And it's been a while since I think we've done one of those. I forget what the last retro shock is. But Bob, when we do this segment called a retro shock, what does that mean? What are we doing? What is that?
Well, first, doo-doo. And second, the retro shock is when we talk about a show or a movie that we have not returned to in quite some time. That was a major part of our lives in our youth, whether it's our young childhood of the 70s and 80s or our college years in the 90s. We talk about it, we remember it, we reminisce, and then we actually go and watch it, and we see if it holds up, if it still affects us the same way.
Fart.
Yeah. And today, we're talking about... Really? You're going to lose it over that?
No, I'm not. I'm just briefly laughing at the word fart. I feel a little bad because I was sitting on that for the duration of what you were saying. I bet you did a great introduction.
You were just
but
waiting.
After you said...
You didn't hear anything. You were just waiting for silence so you could say
so
fart.
I could throw a fart in because you said doo-doo because I guess I said it, but you were pointing it out, which I found funny. But I was like, at the same time, I'm like, that's funny, but isn't it kind of interrupting the flow of the show? But then I was like, you know what? I'm going to say fart. But I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to interrupt them like I normally do. I'm going to wait till there's a pause.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say fart. And then we're going to keep going. But now I'm thinking like we could probably just keep going without the fart bit.
No. It's integral to this entire episode.
Okay.
Which is about Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
The Indiana Jones movie that actually I have probably seen the most of the three of them.
Me too.
Did you see it in the theater?
I did. Mm-hmm. It was so necessary. That was like, there was a time where I was seeing movies every weekend in high school, but this was a movie before high school, and I didn't see movies a lot at that time, but this one I had to see in the theater.
Do people know this one? Do you find people talking about this one?
I don't really. I mean, I can't say that I'm necessarily putting myself in situations where it would come up, but it's not something, you don't necessarily see it on like an AV Club retrospective of that particular year of movies. It doesn't seem to really pop up that often. No.
Why do you think that is? Because it definitely resonates for both of us. It's a big deal for both of us. What is it do you think that maybe keeps this one from being discussed? I mean, he's a big character. Indiana Jones is one of the most iconic characters of the 80s, I would assume. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I guess because Raiders is out there, and Raiders is the first, and Raiders is, your introduction. And if you're going to go back to an Indiana Jones movie and compare, the newer one to what came before it, you're going to compare it to the first one. If you're going to compare an action movie, adventure movie to something else, you're going to compare it to the first one. I guess maybe Last Crusade doesn't necessarily do anything new or different, and maybe that's why it doesn't come up in the topic, because it's just another representation of Indiana Jones. And if you're going to represent Indiana Jones, you're going to do it with Raiders.
When I think of Indiana Jones as a character, what it means to have him as a character, a lot of those traits, a lot of that background, a lot of what shapes in my head what it is for him to be a character who can exist through multiple films, actually comes from The Last Crusade. Like, Raiders of the Lost Ark is a great movie. If it didn't have the follow-ups and sequels, it'd still be a great movie, but would people be talking about Indiana Jones today? Is this maybe the one that is responsible for keeping Indiana Jones alive?
That's an excellent point, and I would probably have to say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Because if you had a third movie that wasn't as good as Crusade, then that sort of changes your viewpoint of the character. To the point where if it's as bad as what came years later, you forget it exists. But it's like, yeah, it's not only is it a great movie, but like you're pointing out, you're finding out more about the character. You're learning more. He's becoming more well-rounded, and less of a superhero kind of character and more of a real person in a way. And yeah, I see your point there.
But I just wonder, why isn't this one talked about more then? Why isn't this the one people recall? And I don't know, maybe we'll have to get into it and really watch it, because maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the Indiana Jones I like is the Raiders one. Last Crusade, because I was in the theater, because I saw it, I saw it twice in the theater, and because there was also this idea of, I don't know, did you think it was the last one when it was coming out? I know it's in the title, but was there the finality of this is his last adventure?
Yeah, absolutely. It's in the title. They ride off into the sunset at the end.
Spoilers for the closing credits of Last Crusade.
Yeah, let's not spoil that. If you haven't seen this already, folks, get out there and watch it.
I mean, you can pause the podcast and go watch it if you'd like.
That's what
or you
we'll
can
do.
wonder, why haven't you watched it, and stick with the podcast as we discuss why maybe this one doesn't resonate with everyone. We always forget to do a segment and then do it later, good memory or bad memory. I think it's very clear that for both of us, this is a good memory.
Oh, absolutely good memory.
When was the last time you watched it?
It has to at least be 15 years, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I haven't watched it since I've had my kids.
Okay.
And they're running up on 11 years, and I have no real recollection of seeing it much before that. But it is like that. I probably have seen it 100 times. But just not at all in the last, I'll say, 10, 15 years.
So are you anxious to go back to it?
Not anxious. Anxious sounds like I'm worried. I'm not worried at all. I'm excited to. And I've tried to get the girls to watch Raiders, and they've watched some of the beginning, but then, my girls are very sensitive. They don't like anything that's tense or scary or unexpected. And they certainly don't like skulls and melting and anything dead fleshy, so that they haven't really watched the Indiana Jones. But Last Crusade, I feel like they could watch. It doesn't have as much of that as the other two, at least to my recollection, except near the end.
Again, spoiler alert for the near finale of Indiana Jones: Last Crusade.
But
so
the
you're
reason
not anxious. You're not nervous. You go ahead.
I'm super excited. And the reason I didn't introduce this or show this to my kids is because I feel like they kind of do need at least Raiders. They could probably skip Temple of Doom and still get some of the inside references that Last Crusade has. And so I haven't shown them Last Crusade. But now that this has become our topic, even though they haven't seen Raiders, I probably will try and get them to watch Last Crusade.
Okay. I'm curious how that plays as just its own standalone adventure.
Yeah.
I'm nervous about watching this movie. I'm a little anxious.
Okay. What is your concern?
That it's not going to hold up. That the reason this one isn't talked about as much is that sort of sequel aspect. Lethal Weapon movies did it. Return of the Jedi does it, although I love Return of the Jedi. Like, I'm wondering, is this the jokier one? Is this one maybe a little too slapsticky? Is this the one that kind of characters suffer, character development suffers and is at the expense of solid jokes or action pieces. Like, I don't remember it that way. I remember loving the movie, but now I'm just kind of like, having seen what pop culture does, having seen some of the icons of pop culture as they go along, kind of, you see it in horror movies all the time. These very iconic characters that can carry a bunch of movies suddenly become jokes, parodies because of how long they've been around. Watching the Alien franchise go 3 strong movies and then fall apart, like seeing how things have to change and become self-aware and a little meta to maintain their existence, and looking at that it was 8 years that Indiana Jones spread over 3 movies. I'm a little anxious about going back to this one because it is very special to me. It is very sacred to me, and I'm wondering in this viewing, is it going to turn out to be less than that?
And how long has it been for you? When was the last time you saw it?
Actually, it's probably been about, like you said, 10 or 15 years. That sounded like a lot when you said it, but now I'm just like, yeah, I haven't put it in. I may have revisited it right before the Kingdom of the Island of the Crystal Skull came out in 2008, in which case it would be about 10 years.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm trepidatious and nervous and ready to go check it out.
Let's do it.
Indiana Jones is on the quest of a lifetime. But for some adventures, one Jones is not enough.
Dad? Junior? Don't call me that, please.
Follow me! I know the way! A race across 3 continents.
And in this sort of race, there's no silver medal for finishing second. Hang on, Dad, we're going in!
Into the homeland of the enemy.
Nazis. I hate these guys.
Our situation has not improved.
In his search for the Holy Grail.
For a while, this was the last Indiana Jones movie. Kind of wrapped up what was at the time a trilogy, saga. Whatever you want to call it. Do you remember that feeling? Kind of like, did you know when this came out that this was going to be, for 20-something years, the last Indiana Jones movie?
Yeah, I did have that feeling and that knowledge, and I remember reading a review or something of it. I can't remember if I read the review before or after the movie, where it was pointed out what happens at the end, the very end. They literally ride off into the sunset, and so it just added that finality to it.
And I think knowing that at the time, but I was really aware of that this time, thinking about that. I thought maybe as we discuss it, an idea that we can touch on a little bit is this idea of how do you wrap up your trilogy or saga? I mean, here's the thing. Do you think of Indiana Jones as an ongoing series? We've watched all 3 movies now. We have an episode on the Temple of Doom and an episode on Raiders. Do you think of this as one continual story of one guy?
No, I've never thought of it that way. I thought of it as like a little vignette, sort of, maybe like one little piece of the guy's life, and we follow the character. We don't even follow the character, but here's this character in a new story. Here's this character in another new story. So I never saw it as I'm not going to understand the second one if I don't see the first one. Now, with the third, there's bits that are more enjoyable because you know the character and because you know the other movies, specifically the first one.
What kind of opens up with that? I feel like this opening of the movie, like how did you remember this? Do you remember that the movie started with a flashback to Indy as a child?
Like it's what I used to try and sell it to my girls because I wanted them to watch this. Did
they watch it?
They started watching the opening because I kind of had to explain to them what the opening was about because my girls can't watch something without knowing how it's going to end. They both have their anxiety issues and they don't like being nervous or worried or scared for the characters, and so they need to know what's going to happen. So I tried to explain it to them.
Did they know who Indiana Jones was? Did they know that character?
They knew enough, yeah. They know enough now. They've never... my youngest, she watched a lot of Raiders with me once. Mm-hmm. And she asked me to tell her when to close her eyes if there was something scary. So I did what I could. But she didn't watch the whole thing, but she watched enough of it. And then my oldest, she just is aware of things and has friends that know of Indiana Jones, and in fact, just recently, she was at a D&D game.
That's Dunkin' Donuts game.
Dunkin' Donuts game.
A Dunkin' Donuts campaign.
But yes, apparently one of the kids was making references to Indiana Jones, and then my daughter drew a picture of her as Indiana Jones running away from the boulder, and I think she knows of that more so from an episode of The Simpsons where they parody that. So, yes, he's a pop culture icon, and so they are fully aware of who he is at this age.
But then it's kind of like Last Crusade puts all of that in a weird perspective.
Yeah.
Last Crusade is kind of the piece that gives you the character, gives you the development, gives you the sense of, I don't know. Let's talk about it. And again, the best way to talk about it is this opening with River Phoenix playing a young Indiana Jones. I mean, that, like we just said, is entirely reliant on knowing this character, knowing what's preceded it, and knowing the actor, knowing Harrison Ford. I mean, this is a pretty meta, self-aware way to start.
Yeah,
your action.
It turned out to be like the absolute most important day of Indiana Jones's life.
Well, what happens on this particular
every little thing that would turn him into who he is happened today.
Right? Because what do you see? You see him. You see him get his whip. You see him get the scar that Harrison Ford has on his lip. You see his fear of snakes.
You see him idolize an archaeologist who wears a leather jacket and fedora, which he gets from that archaeologist. Mm-hmm. So, all those things.
And does it work? I mean, is this a good start to your action movie?
I love it.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah, I think it works. And again, it works because you know Indiana Jones.
Is that the only way it works? Because it is an exciting, like this movie, by the way, all the movies are exciting. This movie is relentless. There's very little chance to catch your breath in this movie, which I think for the most part works on it. But this opening start, I mean, it's beautifully shot. It's fun. I had kind of forgotten, and it seems like I should know this, but Indiana Jones movies, they're a little heightened in reality. They're not like the falls, the chases, the running. It's all a little more exaggerated. And this has a pretty amazing chase atop a train where they're going in and out of the train cars. That's a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. And you have an actor River Phoenix is doing a spot on, I think, Harrison Ford impression. Not a spot on Indiana Jones impression, but he's doing a very good version of Harrison Ford, I think.
Yeah.
And that's weird though, right? Like, is it odd that the movie is telling you that Harrison Ford plays this character? The start of this movie, it is filling in some backstory on who Indiana Jones is, but it's building it around the idea of here's Harrison Ford. That's a weird way to give your character depth, isn't it?
Yeah, although I don't know if I fully agree with that. I mean, I'm not seeing that as what they're presenting. I feel like they're presenting the icon of Indiana Jones.
I feel like he's really serious. I feel like River Phoenix is very serious in this role. I think his vocal inflections, his gestures, his facial expressions, they all look like Harrison Ford, which is beautiful casting and beautiful acting. And it's a shame for a lot of reasons that he passed on and we couldn't get more movies. But when you get to your third movie, I mean, we've seen this with the Marvel movies when they got to Endgame. So not the third, but many down the line. You see this in Star Wars sequels. I mean, is this a case? And I guess you're saying, no, I feel like this is a little bit of, this is more the actor than the character. This is more the bigger spectacle than the story. It's fun and I like it. And it's interesting to see him as this kid. But this is totally reliant on us knowing Harrison Ford. And that shakes the story up a little bit, I think. Again, I like it. It's a 12-minute prologue, and it's very exciting. It's fun. I don't quite understand the magic trick that gets him out of the car. He's going from car to car, and there's snakes, there's lions. He goes into a magic car. He crawls into a wooden trunk. And you watch the trick get done, which is fun. You watch it through the camera in one shot. You see, okay, they just did an illusion. I don't get how that works. Indiana Jones is not known for knowing magic, but it's fun, whatever. And I
don't know that and I've always seen it as he didn't anticipate that that's how he was going to get out, that perhaps he could just hide in there, and then lucked out that it had a false bottom.
But why? A train car with a false bottom would have crushed him. Plus, people who go to see a magic act aren't watching it in the train. That magic act would be set up somewhere.
Yeah. So again,
I never stumbled over that before, but this time I was like, wait a second. Suddenly I wanted a little bit more logic.
Yeah.
In the Last Crusade. And again, that I've never thought that before. I think I've always thought, ooh, how did he do the trick? But I'm just like, wait, no, how did he get out of there? Because that makes no sense. But in terms of an opening, it is fun, and it gives us something that I don't think I would have ever asked for. We see his dad, or we see an actor portraying his dad's arm. But bringing that element in, I mean, I think it works. I think it's important. I think that's what, it's weird though. It's like, that's what's going to give this character backstory, an actual history relationship with his dad. A here before never mentioned character, a relationship that's never acknowledged, and yet I think it's handled pretty naturally. But yeah, I don't know. Is it too late in the series to build a backstory for your character?
I don't think so. Not when you're doing it this well.
It's weird that there's only been 2 movies before this, because this one, kind of like what Return of the Jedi does, where it's like, here's some Death Stars for you again. Here's Tatooine again. This movie gives you some familiar moments from Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Right.
It brings you back to college. He's a little older. He's a teacher. It brings Marcus Brody, a friend of his, back in. It's giving you some familiar touchstones.
Yeah.
Almost to the point that, do you think you could go right from Raiders into this movie? Can you skip Temple of Doom?
Oh, you can absolutely skip Temple of Doom. And I think they do. I mean, I don't think there is a Temple of Doom reference in this movie. Is there?
No, I don't think there is, but doesn't the existence of a second movie, isn't that what kind of warrants, let's finally get to know, like, more about him? Like, would this have made sense as the second movie? If this was just a 2-part film, Raiders and the Last Crusade, would it have the impact?
I don't know if it would have had the impact, because I think part of what the third movie does, or what it plays off of, is, again, just the character's pop culture status, up to that time. So you've got the 2 movies, but then you just have just the replays of it and the watching of it, and just you as a fan. I mean, I played Indiana Jones, out in my backyard. I'm sure you probably did at some point. And so just the years of living with Indiana Jones, the character, and then the pop culture icon, and then you have this movie. I think this movie is made better by that passage of time and just being with that character and knowing that how much you enjoy that movie and watching the other 2 movies repeatedly, perhaps, and then you get to this one and it's like it just kind of pays off having that knowledge, you know what I mean? Like we've already talked about the opening, all these tag backs to how things may have developed and how he became who he became, and then seeing Sala again and Brody and all that. I think it's pretty awesome.
Now, nowadays, I guess, with on the internet and when we talk about pop culture, that's called fan service.
Yeah.
This idea that you put stuff in the movie that's just for the fans. And that pluses and minuses to that. I guess if you are a fan of it, if you're a comic book fan, it's a comic book movie, you love it. If you're kind of going to Harry Potter because that's what was showing and you're lost because you're like, that woman just became a snake, it's confusing. Back with Last Crusade, does it feel like that? Does it feel like I don't remember that being a word in 1989, fan service, or even a concept. Does this movie feel like it's a little manipulative in that we're going to show you the things you liked again? Because it has to be. You're saying that it is part of this movie is existing within the phenomena of Indiana Jones.
Right. I mean, I didn't think that at the time. But I certainly thought about that as I was watching it just this last time, because it's like, do you need Brody? Do you need Sala? It could have been any character. Short Round could have come back, I guess, in some aspect, but he didn't. They were in the same region, so it made sense for Sala to be there. And it started with getting the letter and everything when he was back at college, so Brody was already there. So I don't know. I think it all made sense in the story that they were telling in Last
So you
Crusade.
like these characters. You like Marcus Brody and Sala.
Yeah. I got no complaints. I mean, I think they became a little more comical in this version than I remember them in Raiders.
This movie needs to top itself. It needs to top the previous ones, but also needs to... Or this idea that's like, we want to get those feelings back. Raiders of the Lost Ark, when it came out, was brand new. And so the experience of seeing that was unlike, I mean, I know it harkens back to movie serials and things like that, but for the audience, we hadn't seen a movie like that on the big screen. To follow it up with Temple of Doom is such a departure from that, and such a dark movie, regardless of my own perceptions on that, it gives you a different experience. It's not the same thing. It's not repeating beats. Like I appreciate that. Last Crusade is very focused and working really hard to make sure that you're like, here's that red line you like on the map, and here's this stunt spectacular, and this is an even bigger jump, and this is an even bigger jump off of something. Like, it is so focused on making sure you are feeling like this is the most exciting one. This one is bigger. This one is bigger. And there's something, I don't know. Do you feel that? Am I just talking more words than needed? Like, do you have that sense?
I didn't know. I didn't really get that sense. I mean, I guess maybe I was just caught up in it enough where
this particular viewing.
Yeah, this particular viewing. I didn't step outside of it and see it as a one-upman of the other two. And it's strange too, because for me, and I think we've talked about this before, this was the one I probably was more familiar with in my youth.
No, me too. Definitely. This is my favorite one. It's the one I saw in the theater.
Yeah, it's the one I saw in the theater. It's the one I had on VHS. I didn't have the others on VHS. And I had seen the others, but probably, on TV or in bits and pieces with things cut. I did see Temple of Doom on a theater at a college because I think I told you the story. I went to a day camp at a college, and it was like an athletic camp, and it was a rainy day, and so they had the movie for the college students, and so we ended up watching it. Which was pretty awesome, just to experience it that way.
That's 1/3 of the series too. So you've seen, when you saw Last Crusade, you had seen most of the Indiana Jones movies in the theater.
Yeah, but yeah, I didn't think of it that way. It didn't come off to me that way. Mm-hmm. It felt just like another Indiana Jones movie where you've got set piece after set piece after set piece. And yeah, they were big, but I didn't feel like they were like forcing anything. The one thing, let me rephrase that. There's one thing that I feel like they forced that they could have done without, and that was the plane crashing through the tunnel.
That sequence is weird, right? It really jump around a little bit. Again, I love this movie. I'm not saying I don't. I'll just say right now, this is a great memory. It's a great movie. It's very enjoyable. But there are two moments where the movie stops to breathe, and that's it. And there's a sequence. Yeah, they're on a blimp, and then they have to get off the blimp. I think, is that right? Is that the plane chase?
Yeah, they were on the blimp, and they thought they were getting out of Germany, and then the blimp started to turn around, so that they had to get off, and they took the plane that was attached to the blimp, and then there were also planes already in the air that are now following them.
Yeah, and that's one of the action sequences where I'm like, this is big, but kind of boring to me. It's funny, actually. There are some funny jokes in it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that sequence doesn't make sense. Like, that's one of those, like, Rube Goldberg designed kind of things. Like, we've got a plane, like, where the plane, because they're being chased by Nazi planes, was the plan to shoot the blimp down?
I think it was just to escort the blimp back. Because they were on the blimp, but then one of the German generals or whatever,
in some very stunning blue screen, shakes his fist at the blimp.
Yeah, well, he was on there and he got kicked off. And you would think that the moment somebody falls out of a window of your blimp, you're not going to be taking off, but apparently they they did.
Right? I thought that this time too. Like that's a lot of suspension of disbelief. Because that's a Nazi leader. That's someone who was stalling the blimp for that very reason.
Right. So just as I was starting to really like dig into that thought, that's when the blimp started to turn around, and I'm like, oh, okay, so that makes a little bit of sense. They radioed to the blimp. The guy got back to the headquarters and said, hey, we got to turn that blimp around. I just got thrown off of it. So they did turn the blimp around, and probably by that time they sent some planes up into the air to make sure that they could stop the blimp or whatever.
So what is it about that's silly about that sequence? Because yeah, this and there's the motorcycle chase are both very well put together sequences that I felt like this is one thing too many. What was silly? Describe that, because you are loving this movie more than I am, and I love it. So I'm just curious, what's the one thing then about that puts you off?
The one thing that put me off, that really took me out of it, honestly, was for its time, it might have been good, but I was really stunned by the poor effect of it.
Oh, it's the effects of it.
Yeah.
It's not the whole plot of it.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's pretty silly. You've got
they straight
Indiana
up steal
Jones.
a guy's car. Indiana Jones's dad steal a guy's car.
Yeah. But that's when they get land. First they have to fly and have Henry Jones shoot the plane, because he doesn't know how to work the machine gun in the back. So he ends
Which
up
I do
shooting.
laugh at. That is funny.
Yeah.
But it's a little
And it's well played.
slapsticky.
Yeah, and then they've got to land it, and then they crash, and then they have to get away, and so then they get in the car, and then the planes keep chasing them, and then they're trying to outrun one of the planes as they head towards the tunnel, and the plane, instead of flying over the tunnel to get them on the other side, flies lower and lower and lower to chase them through the tunnel, and it cracks off both of its wings, and then the hull of the airplane just skids past the car, and the pilot makes eye contact with the Joneses as he goes
and he
by.
Can't believe it. He can't believe what just happened. He looks so lost. He kamikaze. That's offensive. He flew his plane into the tunnel. What could he have expected?
Right.
And then the logic of it is like, well, the wings ripped off, but the plane's still okay. And then when the plane gets out of the tunnel, if we're going to buy the previous logic, it just explodes.
Right. Well, by that time, the gas lines have ruptured, and the flames.
I don't think they're kept in the wings. I don't think they
Ignited.
keep the gas lines in the wings. I don't know for a fact, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's played for a laugh. I think you're supposed to laugh at that. The look that he, and I get it. It's funny, and it's one thing after another. Yes, the blue screening is a little weak in that part, but it's also that's too much. That's the movie really. That's a well choreographed sequence that maybe is missing any connection. And that's the thing. Like, this movie is trying so hard. It's throwing comedy in at a weird moment, which is fine. There's a lot of comedy in this movie. And honestly, I was surprised that most of the comedy works in this movie. There's far more jokes than ever before, though. Like, it's that idea of they're kind of cutting loose, but not really, because most of them are in character. I don't like the whole Indiana Jones as master of disguise. He keeps putting on other people's hats and pretending to be Scottish, like that.
Keeps doing it.
bothered me.
What other time
He
does he
puts
do it
on a
besides
Nazi
the Scottish
costume.
guy?
He puts
that's right.
puts on someone. There's 3 hats he wears. I'm forgetting the third one. Listeners, text us in. Text us at Indy Hats. But hashtag hats tag Indy's hats. But like, did you like that? Did you like the comedy of earlier in the movie? He shows up at this castle, and to get in, he pulls a Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, no, I didn't mind that.
Really? That's our character?
I actually was like, wow, I'm surprised he hasn't done more Scottish characters, Harrison Ford, because he does that accent pretty well.
Harrison Ford does, sure, but does Indiana Jones, has he ever been a master of disguise? He puts on a Nazi outfit in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Right.
But other than that, like, that was weird. That just felt like this is a comical, cartoonish beat.
Yeah.
And that whole castle scene, he infiltrates this castle where his dad's being held captive. And again, their interplay is brilliant. Sean Connery is a good actor, and every now and then I think that he's not. He's really good in this. Yeah. He's wonderful as the father.
And it's great to see him in this character, kind of a bumbly older, professor type who's caught up in something bigger than he can handle. Because usually he's Con Air. No, not Con Air. What am I thinking of? The Rock.
The Rock.
Yeah.
Con Air on an island.
Con Air on an island. But yeah, no. So it's great to see him in a non-James Bondy, The Rock kind of role.
Yeah, and he really gives himself to the role, and I think for the most part, his performance earns the quirkiness. There's some bumbling and slapstick stuff with they both get tied to a chair when they're in that castle. And there's a whole thing with one of them gets punched and the head bumps into the other one. It's funny. Yeah. But there is a weird sort of we're going to leave them laughing in the aisles. There's a lot of bumblingness, which I don't think you get in the other. I mean, you kind of do. The minecart chase in Temple of Doom a little bit. Yeah. But they set the whole room on fire. That's another thing. Talk about some logic. When they're tied... Indiana Jones and his dad are tied to the chair back to back. Nazis are in the next room, so they want to try to get out. So Indiana Jones tells his dad to get the lighter out of his pocket because there's a Zippo lighter in there and try to burn through the ropes. Right. Ultimately, what happens is Henry Jones drops the lighter and the chair catches on fire. How is that any different than setting the ropes on fire?
Right. It's like if the rope lighting thing were successful.
How would it have been?
Yeah, how would that be successful? You would be scalding yourself. You'd probably set your coat on fire as you're tied up there. There's no way for that to be a good idea.
Right. It's a set piece. It's a comical set piece. And these movies always are set pieces. They're normally, again, they're normally rescue missions or evading missions or booby traps. There's a lot of comedy. The plane part you were just talking about a lot of comedy based around, aren't they funny when they're bumbling around? Yeah. And they're still very well choreographed pieces. They play really well. They are exciting, but the motivation of them is you're going to laugh at this. This is the Indiana Jones movie that is a comedy versus the other two. Right. And again, a lot of it works because you're talking about Sean Connery. I think Harrison Ford always does great work as Indiana Jones. Their relationship, they only have a couple of scenes where they're talking about their relationship as father and son in their past. And those scenes play so well. That earns the adding this character. That earns this is the movie that makes Indiana Jones a character. He's always been fun. Right. He's always been exciting, but this is the movie that gives him some depth. The third one, so that retroactively, the Indiana Jones and Raiders and Temple of Doom is a great character because of this movie.
Yeah. And I think that worked for our generation because, at least for me anyway, I was too young for the first two. Mm-hmm. And so this was the movie that sort of I was aware of Indiana Jones, but then I got to know Indiana Jones with this movie, making the other movies feel more important in a way.
Which is odd because this movie needs those movies to exist to work. All of this about him, Last Crusade, I don't think could be your first Indiana Jones movie. I mean, maybe it could, maybe if that was the first one to come out, but I feel like the introduction of his dad, the building of his past, you're filling in the holes and they're doing it really well. It's just odd. It's odd to think of Last Crusade as a character piece because that's not what this character is known for.
Right. Right. The tone is definitely different.
Yeah, but that's not off-putting to you, huh? With the exception of a plane flying into a tunnel.
No, it's not entirely off-putting, no. One thing that I noticed that maybe plays into this a little bit, because you talked about it being choreographed. Something I noticed on this viewing, and I'd have to go back and watch the other two, and the other two had this kind of realistic feel to it. They were in the jungle. They were in the caves. They were in the caverns. They were, this movie, its set pieces seemed more staged. As much as I know that those were stages in those other two movies too, this felt more like this is actually a studio stage here that we're on. And then
really?
the acting and some of the movements of the characters were so methodical and so perfect that it's like they must have rehearsed that 100 times to get that so perfect every time.
Oh.
And that came off. I noticed that more on this viewing of this third movie. Even the scene, especially the scene, this is where I started to really feel it, where he was taken to the hotel or wherever he is, and he is introduced to, I can't even think of the guy's name right now, the villain, although we don't know he's the villain yet, and he sees the tablet. That whole
right at the beginning, the lore scene, I love that scene.
It's a great scene, but if you really watch it, it's such a dance. It's so choreographed. The pauses, the moments, the beginnings of one story by one person, the finishing of the story by the other person, the wife coming in and saying, "Oh, you're ignoring your guests," and she even like turns and nods her head to acknowledge Indiana Jones, and then the camera pulls back. He's not even looking at her. So it's like all these movements are so set, and they must have done it every time.
That's funny because I love that scene. It's because they're setting up the movie for you,
Yeah.
they're telling you the history of the Grail. That to me was a totally intentional, unavoidable callback to Raiders. Raiders of the Lost Ark has that great scene.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things where it's like they're repeating, George Lucas talks about with the Star Wars movies, this ring, and people talk about the ring theory where it's like, it's motifs. You repeat motifs, almost like it's music, different things. And I felt like that was a repetition. I loved that so much. I loved Donovan is that character's name.
Right,
Walter Donovan. I love him in this. He's no Belloc, but he's good. Like I like him in that scene. But that's the thing. He is Belloc. He's set up to be the same thing as Belloc.
Right.
And you're getting the same sort of, just in case you don't know in the audience, here's what the movie's about and setting it up. Does the Raiders one feel staged to you? When in Raiders, they go into...
I mean, I have to watch it
They use
again,
like a chalkboard. He's drawing stuff. He opens the book up and it happens to have an exact drawing of the ark they find later.
No, it didn't.
In the Bible.
It never stood out that way, but... and I watched it pretty recently. No, it felt more.
So if it
felt more realistic.
But this one, and that was a detracting, or that was just an observation.
Just an observation. It didn't really detract, and I was also trying to figure out, like, is it this way? Am I recognizing it this way because I've seen this movie so many times? And so for me, I could basically do the movements and everything. I know that the pauses so well, so maybe that's why I was noticing it more, because I've seen this movie so often.
But I mean, I think it's a good point to make because we both like it, but you seem more in the camp of this movie's great all the way through. Yeah. But that's a stumbling part. The thing that was a stumbling block, I think, is similar to that to me because it follows a formula, and it is what we expect from the movie. The character of Elsa, what's her last name? Elsa.
Did we get a last name?
Notes. We did. It's in my notes. I don't know why I'm looking for it.
Yeah, because they call it Professor someone. Because we don't know she's a woman yet. But I can't remember.
Yeah, so she's kind of like she's his Indy's contact when he goes to try to find he's looking for his dad, but he's also looking for the marker to find the Grail. She kind of helps get him involved with the continuing the hunt with the Grail. And she turns out to be a Nazi, but she's also the love interest. And
pseudo love interest, yeah.
A forced love interest. That was in the movie.
True.
He arrives in Venice. She meets him, like you're saying. They were expecting a male doctor, but it's a female doctor of archaeology. I don't even know, but they meet up with her. And the moment they meet up with her, there's this. He's just bantering with her. Will you permit me for a line? No, but they're just flirting back and forth. I'm just like, where is this? That's not Indiana Jones. That's out of nowhere. That's just a horn dog guy with an erection the moment he sees a woman hitting her with that erection. But even the movie loses track of it. Like, thankfully, he falls out of love with her when he realizes she's a Nazi.
That tends to happen.
He threatens to strangle her to death.
That also tends to happen.
That was rough. I had a hard time with that. That's our hero, ladies and gentlemen. But I don't know. That was I either take her out or just have her be. have her be just a colleague of his that turns on him. Like that romance felt, because, you get Marion in Raiders, which is a great romance, unless you think about the age difference that they talk about. You get Willie Scott in Temple of Doom, which, and we talked about that in the episode, Willie Scott as a character gets the short end of characterization. They don't do much with her, but that antagonistic relationship, whether or not it always works, I get it. Indiana Jones and her were bickering. It's kind of this 1940s kind of bickering thing. This one in this movie is kind of like he needs a love interest. He doesn't need that. And I stumbled over that. I get it, because you want the betrayal. You want the joke with how his dad also slept with her. But that just felt, that was one of those paint by numbers, check marks, similar to what you're saying. Maybe that felt stagey to me, similar to what you're saying about the scene with the Grail. But the Grail scene seems to work for you.
Which Grail scene?
I'm sorry, not the Grail scene. The scene where Donovan and him are talking about the history of it. I wrote in my notes the lore scene, when you're learning about what the movie's going to be about.
You're saying it does work for me? Yeah, it works for me.
Right? Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I love it.
It just, again, I was just kind of commenting on how it just is so perfect. Like the cadence of the lines, the way that the wife nods her head, closes the door, and he's turns this, and then he's like, and that's usually when the rug gets pulled out from under you, and Indy just turns and goes, yes. Like, it's just, it's so pristine. And it stood out to me how stagey it seemed, which wasn't a problem. It just was like something I hadn't really noticed before. And maybe it's because, modern movies are so much more, I don't know how to, like, just rough and tumble in a way.
Modern movies can be stagey too, though. I mean, this is the thing we're talking about. This is the third in a series. This is wrapping it up. This is them knowing what they have to do. They have to hit these points. And that might be why it feels stagey, because there's new stuff in this movie. All the stuff with him and his dad is new. We've never seen that before.
It is,
and
but you know what I think? You were just talking about how the first two movies and their love interests and how they were the antagonists in a way. They have a push-pull relationship. That's Henry Jones in this movie. He's essentially the Willie of the Last Crusade.
Except that, and this is where I think this is like some maturity. This is where Indiana Jones has developed character. Indiana Jones wants something different from his dad, obviously, than he wants from Willie Scott. But there is an actual push for respect. There is an actual, and I had never really realized this before. I know it's there, but we get a lot of Indiana Jones feeling abandoned by his dad. And you get a lot of his dad thinking like, no, I was a great father. I taught you to be the character you are. I let you do what you wanted to do. I let you pursue archaeology. I never told you to come home early. Like, there's this push and pull that there's a real tension there. It's not this assumed love interest tension. It's a parent sibling relationship. It's a mentor trainee relationship. And I'm amazed with this that I get a sense of their history through two scenes. They talk about their past together twice. Once on the blimp, which is a great scene, and I'm forgetting when the other one is. I think I forget what it is, but on the blimp you get a little bit of him saying, that's why mom left. So you get that sense that there was some tension in the household. And so, I don't know. I think that's very real. You see Henry not giving up. Henry doesn't say like, yeah, you're right. Henry thinks he's a great dad. And when that moment where he thinks Indiana Jones is dead, when the tank goes over the side of the cliff that Indiana Jones is on, even though we know Indiana Jones is going to come out of that pit, that's an earned moment of him feeling bad, I never got a chance to tell him how I felt. That's such a sappy line, but it's earned because I think they actually have the one thing that's never been in these movies before, a father-son relationship. I mean, Short Round and Indy weren't really father-son. They were, I don't know, employer-employee, something, I don't know.
Right.
But that's new, and I think that works great. I don't see that as sort of a rote relationship that we've seen before.
Yeah, I mean, I think it brings a bit of that kind of beat from the previous movies in that here's Indiana Jones who, if he were on his own, it'd be going a lot smoother. But since he has to have somebody who's not used to this sort of adventure tagging along, so that's how I see it as familiar.
If this movie, Kingdom of the Island of the Crystal Skull does this, Indiana Jones learns he has a kid. If instead of Henry Jones, his father, if this movie followed the same plot, but it was Indiana Jones and his daughter and his son and his kid, do you think that would work? Could that work?
I don't know if that could work.
Right? Because
Yeah.
we've never seen any parental figures. We don't think of family. I think this movie brings it in a nice way.
Yeah.
And I think it's what saves this movie. Like, the movie is very exciting, and it would still be exciting. And the movie is very funny, and that's a fun thing to experience. I loved it as a kid. I loved it now. But I think at the core of it, having Indiana Jones, and we've said on the other episodes, Indiana Jones works best when he is not a superhero, when he's
Right.
flustered, when he's floundering. And what better way to show someone floundering than introduce them to the ultimate authority figure, and in his life, that's his father.
Right.
Like, that makes this movie, and it does something different to this movie. And it's weird that gives shape to the whole trilogy now.
Right.
Which plays out of order anyways. The first one is in the middle and blah, 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 but...
True.
Because otherwise it's just, and this isn't a bad thing because I love it, but it's just Raiders of the Lost Ark again. We get another gnarly death when that guy decomposes. That's
Right.
pretty funny, right? When Donovan dies. That
Funny.
special effect is pretty funny when he turns into the skull. He's like, oh.
I mean, I wouldn't call it funny.
His hair starts to grow longer. His eyes
I
bug
think it
out.
works quite well. I think it works well because it happens so quickly. Like it doesn't linger for too long.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind.
I think it's hilarious. But either way, but that is just opening the arc again.
Right.
Like,
No,
it's interesting.
exactly.
There is a little bit of knowledge, like the whole which of these is the cup of the of Jesus, and it's like, it's the humblest cup. Like, that's that's interesting. And then the three trials he has to get through to get there, they're all interesting. But this whole thing is just the first movie again.
Right.
And we have a fondness for it. I think I do, and you do. And, and it's the one we saw in the theater. It was exciting. And I wasn't thinking of any of this as a kid. And I do think it still works. But do you think if we were older when this movie came out, because we were like 14 or 15, let's say we were Phantom Menace age. Let's say we were 25, 26 when Last Crusade came out, given what it is, given how it mimics this original one, if we were more cynical 20-somethings seeing this versus the kids who saw it, do you think it would still resonate? Do you think it would still have worked?
I think it would have, yes. Because we're cynical now and it still works.
But we also have, part of the reason it still works is we loved it as kids.
True. But I don't know. I just think it's well done enough and different enough that the familiar beats aren't a problem. They're more of, even at that older age, it's just more of that warm familiarity.
Well,
which I don't think is a problem in this movie. And I don't think it's being done just for the sake of doing it. It serves the story. It serves this movie.
So there's you find no cynicism, and maybe they were just doing what they knew that worked. They were doing what worked before.
Yeah, and it's hard to hypothesize because it is so ingrained in me. But yeah, I don't think it would be I don't think I would see it any differently.
So this past Christmas season, that just passed, December, both you and I, at separate times, went to see a movie that was supposed to cap off, in this case, 42 years of a storyline. Episode 9 of the Skywalker saga, Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
So that's a finale. That's a finale that hits familiar beats, not just from the original trilogy, but from The Force Awakens. It's another map. They're going after the same thing. This has characters we like. It heightens the jokes. It gives us some family relations with the Emperor and Rey. Oh, spoilers, by the way, for Rise of Skywalker. And I like the new characters. I like Star Wars. I've never gone to a theater and not liked Star Wars. I saw Rise of Skywalker, and I don't want to say I hated it, although I've said that off the microphone, but I was unaffected by it. I was bored by it. It didn't hit any of the emotional beats of the original movie and movies. And I feel like I used to always just be, it's Star Wars. I'll like anything, at least in the theater. I always like things in the theater because it's big and it's exciting. But this was, it's well made. It's no small spectacle. They're handing you lots of explosive times, but there wasn't anything offered to me in that movie. I think kids like it. We both know some friends who have liked it. I'm wondering if I was younger, would I have liked it more?
Right.
If and that's why I wonder with Last Crusade when it came out. Is there enough to it? And I think we're saying there is. But is some of why it works? Because honestly, I always say Raiders of the Lost Ark is my favorite one. I think I have the most fun watching Last Crusade.
Sure.
Like good reality or bad reality for me. I mean, it's a good reality. It has the most consistent fun to it. Yeah. Even though I think Raiders is the better made movie. Was there anything new about it this time? Watching it, do you have any new experiences? I know you said a little bit about like how it felt a little stagey.
Yeah, that was the only thing that really stood out on this new viewing. But other than that,
was it just like watching it again?
Just like watching it again? Is that what you asked?
Yeah, like just as enjoyable as watching it any other time you've ever watched it?
Yeah, I almost watched it a second time before we recorded.
So you're loving it. It's like McDonald's to you.
I do. I love this movie. I really do. And again, maybe it's because, like you're saying, it's the one that I enjoy watching. Like Raiders is great, yes, but you don't get the joy maybe that you get when you watch. I
mean, I do. I know when we watched it, I enjoyed it. But yeah, and Temple of Doom there's some great moments in that.
Yeah.
And it's wonderfully bleak. Like that's a wonderful fuck you audience to put that as your movie. But yeah, Last Crusade seems more magical, and which is weird because Raiders is I don't know. Maybe I'm just all talk right now because I'm going to say Raiders is the better movie, but I'm saying I enjoyed Last Crusade more. I mean, is this the greatest Indiana Jones movie? I guess, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's my favorite.
It is. So then yes.
If I had to watch one of the three of them, I'd probably pick this one.
God, I want to say Raiders of the Lost Ark, but yeah, this one, because it has the maturity of the father-son relationship and because it's so confident in who Harrison Ford is, not Indy, it is a lot of fun, even though I can poke more holes in it. And it's a fitting send-off, like it's a nice cap to it. And we went a long time. We went almost 20 years without thinking we needed another one.
Yeah.
As a kid, did you want more Indiana Jones movies after Last Crusade?
I felt satisfied, honestly.
Right?
I never had a thought about more Indiana Jones. I would like to have seen more Star Wars. That's what I thought I wanted to see more of, but I never thought about seeing more Indiana Jones.
Yeah, so let's end on that. Let's talk about that for a minute, because that idea of being satisfied by something, that this told the story and I'm satisfied by it.
Yeah.
That's lacking in the movie-going experience.
Oh, yeah.
Marvel spent 11 years giving us, honestly, enjoyable movies throughout. There's not a single Marvel movie of the Marvel Cinematic Universe I don't like. There are some I like less than others.
Sure.
But they told multiple stories in one massive story We get to Endgame. Endgame is phenomenal. It's a huge end. It's rewarding. It's repetitive from other movies, but it's also rewarding for all this time you spent. And that gave me the feelings that I thought Rise of Skywalker was going to give me and didn't. It was a rousing experience. In a way, shouldn't that be it? Couldn't that be it? I mean, doesn't it feel like that should be it? Like we got 11 years of...
You're saying enough Marvel movies, we did it?
Well, I mean, I want to see the next ones they do, but yeah, like this feeling of satisfaction. Why don't I have it with that the way that I have it? Like I thought that was great that you said that you felt satisfied by Last Crusade. Why can't we get that through other movies? I mean, we get it in Back to the Future. I don't want a fourth Back to the Future. And we get it in Ice Pirates. I don't want a second Ice Pirates.
I think because, there's many factors, I'm sure, but one of them is that I think at the time there wasn't as much of a push to keep selling and selling and selling the movies and the characters. I think they would be satisfied and everyone was happy actually having an ending. And I think that's what Back to the Future and Indiana Jones do. They give you an ending. Sure, the characters live on and do other things in their world. There's that
animated series for Back to the Future where a lot more time travel happened.
But for us, for the cinematic, for the films, they give you an ending. They destroy the DeLorean. It's over, like it's an ending. They ride off into the sunset in Indiana Jones. It's the end. And so they don't really do that anymore with the movies now because they just want to be able to sell it some more and make more money.
But that's reductive. I mean, there's still people telling a story. Endgame was a well-written movie and well-performed and produced movie. It's not just to sell tickets.
Yeah,
also, Return of the Jedi had a finale. Return of the Jedi tied up that story in 3 movies.
Yeah.
But we kept going back, and I'm glad we got the prequels, and I'm glad we got 2 of the 3 new Disney saga ones. Like, I'm happy that they exist. But, yeah, I don't... And there is another Indiana Jones movie. That's the thing. There is a 4th one.
Yeah.
But I'm okay ignoring it.
Totally ignoring it. And I have no interest in the 5th one upcoming.
No? You don't want to see him in 1968 or whatever it is. Yeah. He's going to be running around with Nixon or something.
I don't right now.
No, I don't either.
I might be swayed, but not right now.
But it's okay if we're not, right? Because we have these 3. And I guess it was interesting that Rise of Skywalker came out around the time we're talking about this because I have my 3 favorite Star Wars movies. To talk about that for a minute, I have 3 prequels that I like, and I have a finale of sorts, if it has to keep going, from The Last Jedi that I had to not even convince myself, but I'm learning to accept that I can just not like Rise of Skywalker. Yeah. I can just be fine with not following something anymore. Right. And that's new to me. And that's why I was happy to hear you say you were satisfied by The Last Crusade. Because I never think about that. I never stop and think like, am I satisfied? And yeah, that was a pretty satisfying series of 3 movies. And that's all we need. And it is odd that that's not maybe the mindset. I don't know if that's because we're older and we can think it through, or if that's because that's how Hollywood works and movies work. But yeah. Any final thoughts on
I was going to ask if this podcast is satisfying, this episode, Tim. Was this a satisfying episode?
Well, I mean, it was funnier than some of the other ones, but the part where we went through the tunnel in the flaming plane just felt forced. Yeah, a little bit. But hey, it's not the last one, everyone. No, there will be more. But if you liked this one, and want to maybe follow what led up to it, the ones that preceded it, visit 20popcast.com. That's the main website for the show. We're done, right? We're done talking about Last Crusade?
I'm pretty done.
Did you have something else you wanted to say? I'm sorry.
No. I'm good. I think I'm good.
All right. I mean, I enjoyed it. I thought we kind of got to something, and we're getting you, the audience, to visit us at 20popcast.com, website with the most recent episode up there to listen to, links to all of our past episodes, as well as ways to subscribe to the show. And I want to say, if you like the show, if you enjoy the show, if you're following the show, please subscribe to it. We love having an audience, and when you subscribe to it, you get an automatic episode every other week when they're released. And so, yeah, you can visit us there. You can also find links to Twitter and Instagram. I haven't done this part of the show in a while, and I'm telling you, I'm doing it as well as I normally do. Bob, why don't you tell us about what you're doing?
Yeah.
Promote yourself.
Well, yeah, you can follow me at RH Canning on Twitter. And we always like to hear from you folks. Thank you for listening. Engage. Let us know what you think of these Indiana Jones trilogies and this particular movie. Closing it out, ignoring the fourth one. And also, if you want to subscribe early to my Twitter feed for a new comic strip that I'm working on, you're welcome to do that. That's at Bob Issues on Twitter, at Bob Issues. Nothing posted yet, but it's forthcoming.
How forthcoming? When do you think that's? Because I'll put a link in the show notes as well.
My goal is to get something up before the end of January.
And this is an online comic strip that you're going to be doing.
I do not know.
It will happen? We don't know.
We don't know.
Find out by visiting it. That's great. That's awesome.
It's a New Year's resolution of sorts.
Oh, okay, so it probably won't happen. But if it wasn't a resolution, I bet we'd be seeing it in a couple weeks, like you said. It is the new year, everyone. We're hopefully back on schedule. I know we missed a couple weeks there. We're going to keep the show going every other week. And again, I know I always say this, but truthfully, in February, some announcements, some big going-ons for us as podcasters. So I'll talk about that come February. Bob, it's good to talk to you again.
You too, Timmy. I don't think I've ever called you Timmy on this show,
Timmy.
but
yeah,
there you go.
Was good talking to you, Bob. And we'll be back in 2 weeks, but not talking about Total Recall, because you probably thought the 2 weeks was a reference to that. It wasn't. Oh, God, this sucks. Not the show, but this moment of the show.
The Total Recall reference?
Signing off. Like, that's become, we were talking about a gimmick earlier. It's like, I feel like, they're breaking down. They don't know how to do this closing part. They're still underground independent artists. We know how to close out the show. But I do this bullshit. I'm just like, it got out of my hands. It got away from me there. Phew, we stink. We suck. God. And maybe in 2020, we could make a resolution to be a little more professional with wrapping up these shows. Maybe sound like we know and care what we're doing, because we do know and care what we're doing, I think. But
you do.
Sure, I think we. I don't think people want to hear me. They want to hear we.
All right.
Us. Well, they would say them.
I'm not saying they don't want to hear we, but I'm saying that you know what you're doing. I don't necessarily do.
And thank you our sponsors at Nintendo Wii. Sing. See, that was sincerely bad. That was not staged. It just was bad.